Good morning, Misty.
Good morning, Ed.
How are you doing?
I'm fine, thanks. How are you?
I'm excited.
I'm excited too.
It's very exciting. I think we have an opportunity to move the FAFSA to mobile, and then if we get support on the Hill, also simplify the FAFSA.
Absolutely. Looking forward to that, as I think we all are.
I feel like we're in a talk show, like you're Kelly and I'm Ryan.
Except I'm missing my cup of coffee.
Oh yeah, I know. We do need some coffee. Yeah. All right. Well, we don't have much time, so should we get started?
We should get started.
All right.
And we will. In a moment.
Yeah.
There we go.
I don't see our slides.
Okay.
There they are.
All right. As usual, I am here to talk about changes to the FAFSA and the central processing system. This is very difficult now because of the early startup. So a lot of what I'm going to be talking about is stuff that you should already know. But for those of you who maybe put on your to-do list, read all that stuff that the department posted about 1819 enhancements and then didn't actually get to it, I'm going to give you a little bit of a summary about those changes and then point you to the specific resources that you really should be paying attention to get more details. And then my friend Ed here is going to talk about the really fun stuff, which is what are we seeing? What are the students doing? What are the parents doing? What does our application activity look like? And then I'm going to talk about some changes that we were not able to make for the startup for 1819, but that we do plan to make in the spring of 2018, and those changes are very exciting. And then I will just briefly touch on the important dates for 2019-20, give you a general sense of when we expect to be posting the various publications that I know you all look forward to each year. So. This is, as I said, just a quick overview of the changes that we've already implemented, and I touched on some of these at the conference last year. The first one is related to the parent marital status question. We had heard for several years that students and parents were having some difficulty with this question. We believe that was because of a wording change that we made several years ago when we added a new response option of unmarried and both parents living together. We modified the actual question label at that time to specify that we were looking for the marital status of the legal parents, when really what we need is the marital status of the parents, and the legal specification really only applies to that new option that we had added of unmarried and both parents living together. So we removed legal from the question label itself and added legal to the unmarried and both parents living together option. And we will be monitoring applicant activity in order to determine if that change did make a difference. And if not, we'll take another look at it and see if there's something else that we can do to improve that. We also made changes to address those students who are 22 or 23 and indicate on the FAFSA that they are homeless or at risk of being homeless. Prior to the 2018-19 year, somebody aged 22 or 23 was unable to indicate that they had received a homeless determination from one of the specified entities. And that changed at the beginning of the 2018-19 year. So now, if somebody who's 22 or 23 years old does have a determination from one of the entities listed in the 3 FAFSA questions, they will be able to tell us that on the FAFSA and automatically be treated by the system as an independent student without having to come to the financial aid office in order to have a determination be made. Now, there are some people, 22, 23, 21, 20, 19, who are homeless. They meet the conditions of being homeless or at risk of being homeless, but they don't have the designation. They will still need to come to the financial aid office in order to receive the financial aid administrator designation, and you'll still continue to report that the same way that you have in the past with the homeless youth override flag. The next few changes have been discussed at the open forum yesterday, as well as during the verification session yesterday. I believe Craig touched on some of these. The first one is related to those people who amended their IRS tax return. We used to have a filtering question in FAFSA on the web that allowed people to self-identify that they had amended their tax return, and if they told us that they had filed an amended return, we did not allow them to use the IRS DRT. The reason for that is because the IRS is only able to send us information from the original tax return, which may not be the information that we actually need them to report on the FAFSA. In discussions with the IRS, we determined that while that limitation does exist, they can only provide us with the original tax return information. They are able to provide us with an indicator if there is an amended return on file. So what we did is we removed the filtering question from the FAFSA, so we're no longer filtering those amended filers out. Instead, we allow them to use the IRS data retrieval tool. And when they transfer their information in, they also are transferring in that indicator to let us know if there's an amended return on file. And if there is, we're letting you know about that by setting the IRS request flag to 07. That tells you that they did use the DRT, they brought the data back. It might be okay, but you need to take a look at it because when they amended their return, they may have made changes to one or more of the data elements that transferred into the FAFSA. We also added some new fields to the ICER called data field flags. There's a data field flag associated with each data element that transfers back from the IRS when the student or parent uses the IRS data retrieval tool. We implemented this enhancement specifically to address the issue that we've all seen for years related to rollovers of pension and IRAs. We have always had difficulty with those people who had a rollover because, number one, it can't be reported on the tax return in a way where the amount can be transferred back via the DRT. Those of you who have seen a tax return with a rollover on it know it's just a handwritten amount, sometime in pencil. And it's not something that's visible on the tax transcript or anything else because of the way that it's actually captured on the tax return. Our instructions, both in the FAFSA and on the IRS side, told people that if they had a rollover, they needed to manually subtract it from the amount that was reported on the tax return. If they followed the instructions, then it changed the IRS request flag from a 2 to a 3, and that then meant that you had, if they were selected for verification, to review all of the data elements and determine which fields actually changed. So we added the data field flags in order to address that specific concern. If a student is selected for verification and you see that the IRS data retrieval, that the IRS request flag is a 03, that tells you that the data was transferred and something was changed, but you no longer have to look at all the data elements to try to figure out what changed. We're telling you with those data field flags. So just take a look at which data field flags are set to, I believe it's a 2, to indicate that the data changed, and then you know to focus specifically on that data element. Now here's something that hopefully you all are aware of, but I did not talk about this at the conference last year because it totally was not on my radar at that point. This was something that came up months later, and because of the complexity of this solution, we actually ended up having to postpone another big change that we were planning and which I'm going to talk about after Ed's done with all his fun stuff. So this is related to the IRS data retrieval tool. As you all know, it was taken offline around March of last year, and we worked tirelessly with the IRS in order to come up with a solution that would allow us to implement it again, and we did implement it again for the 2018-19 year on October 1st when we brought the 18-19 FAFSA up. We made some changes to how the data is transferred between the IRS and the FAFSA to make sure that it was even more secure than before. But we also now cannot display the data that comes back to the taxpayer. It's not displayed on the IRS side, it's not displayed in the FAFSA, and it's not displayed on any output documents that go to the student. So the next few slides give you an idea of what this new user experience is like for our users. So you can see on the screen, this is where in this instance, it's the student, where the student is given the option to link to the IRS. So nothing here changed. This is the page that they go to. They will enter their FSA ID here if they didn't already enter it when they logged into the FAFSA, and they make the choice to proceed to the IRS site. This part where they're authenticating with the IRS also remained unchanged. Same messaging that they got before, collecting the same information here. We pre-populate most of it based on what's in the FAFSA, but they manually enter their address because they specifically are providing the address that's on the tax return, which may not be the same as the address that's in the FAFSA. So far, everything is the same as what it was prior to us implementing the changes. Now, when they successfully authenticate, sorry, there's the address entered. When they successfully authenticate with the IRS, here's where the changes begin. They're taken to a page that no longer provides them with a list of the specific data elements that are on their tax return. Instead, they'll see this more text-based page, which tells them that they successfully authenticated, and there's a list of data elements that could be transferred into the FAFSA if they choose to do that. They still have the option to go ahead and transfer that information, or they can say no. They don't want to transfer, and they can just return to the FAFSA without that information. You can see it lists the information that we're all familiar with already: AGI, taxes paid, et cetera, but there's also an indication here that the status of amended returns received, so that's letting the taxpayer know that IRS will be letting us know if they did file an amended return. Now, once they bring the information back into the FAFSA, instead of seeing the data that was transferred as they used to see, and instead of seeing the entry field, they will instead see text that says transferred from the IRS. So you can see that we're hiding the information that transferred, and we're also preventing them from actually typing anything into those fields. So they can't change any of that data that transferred from the IRS by typing over it. What they will be able to change, however, here's another screenshot that shows some other fields that transferred. And then here's where you'll see down towards the bottom, in this instance, data that transferred back included an IRA distribution. And so there is a new question that we added, which asks, did the untaxed portions of IRA distributions you reported include rollovers? If the answer is no, they move on their way. If the answer is yes, then we display an additional question which asks them to report the rollover amount, and then the system will do the subtraction to come up with the actual amount that should be reported on the FAFSA, and that's the amount that is sent to all of you in the ICER. We have a similar scenario for pensions, and these questions are only displaying if it's a non-zero amount that transfers over. So probably for the majority of people, there is no value for the pension or IRA fields, and in that case, the students and parents would not actually see this new question. All right, now everything that I just went over is not new. And most of you either heard about it last year at the conference, although not in very much detail because we were still in the phase where we were designing the solutions, or in the case of the IRS encryption changes, wasn't on my radar then, didn't tell you about it then, but we certainly have been communicating that information to you since then via electronic announcements and other resources. So just a listing of some of those resources. We have the summary of changes for the application processing system guide, which gives you an overview of all of the changes that we made to the FAFSA, the CPS, FAFSA on the web, FAA access, all of the different ways that you can access the FAFSA data. The demonstration site went live the Sunday before October 1st. That's true every year. We always make it available the Sunday before we go live. So there's the URL, and then the username and password are listed here. For those of you who have not ever gone out to take a look at the demonstration site, I encourage you to do that every year. Really gives you an idea of what students are experiencing. Unfortunately, it does not allow you to see how the IRS data retrieval tool works, but we do have the FAFSA on the web preview presentation, which is a PowerPoint that we post usually right before startup. This year, I believe we were a little late with that, so it came out, I believe, in mid-October, but it includes screenshots of the FAFSA application process, including screenshots of the IRS DRT process. And we hope that you are using those for your outreach and then for training at your institution, so people are up to date on what the experience looks like. We also posted a few electronic announcements. The ones that I want to highlight, I'm going to start from the bottom. In August, we posted a very lengthy EA related to the IRS data retrieval tool changes, and that gave you detailed information, not only about the system changes, like the addition of the data field flags and the new IRS request flag of 7 and that sort of thing, but also guidance about what the school is expected to do if you see transactions that have these new flag values, these new fields, these new star comment codes. Then in September, we posted an electronic announcement reminding institutions about the rules for protecting the information that you receive on the ICER. And then on October 3rd, we posted an electronic announcement making sure you all knew that the FAFSA was live. It includes a link to some frequently asked questions related to the IRS data retrieval tool, and there are also other links and more information about resources that we hope that you, as financial aid administrators, counselors, mentors, that we hope you're using in your outreach and just to educate yourselves on what the changes are for the year. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to Ed.
Thanks, Misty. Let's talk a little bit about prior year and our 2018-19 FAFSA statistics. So last October was the first year that the FAFSA started on October 1st. So none of us were really sure what was going to happen or how it was going to go, but you can see by the numbers displayed here that it went very well. We hoped by giving students and parents 3 more months to fill out the FAFSA that we'd see more FAFSAs filed. And you can see that we did, compared to starting in January 1st for the 2015-16 FAFSA. So, or 2016-17 FAFSA. So FAFSA filing is up. We thank all of you for all the work you did. It was a heavy, heavy lift to make sure that students and parents understood that they could file the FAFSA on October 1st, 3 months earlier than they'd ever been able to file it before. So thank you very, very much. We really appreciate it. And we're very, very happy to see these numbers displayed here. And I can tell you that the numbers for 2018-19 FAFSA, at least for the first month, are very similar to what they were last October. So we're very, very pleased to see the number of FAFSAs filed going up. So thank you, thank you, thank you. This is really cool too, Misty. Number of high school seniors in this country is not increasing at all. It's basically flat nationwide. But what we saw was giving students and parents 3 more months to fill out the FAFSA meant that FAFSA filing among high school seniors also increased significantly in the past year. And I can tell you again that for the first month of the 2018-19 FAFSA, we see that the numbers are also up. They look very similar to last year. So again, this is all very good news, especially I think I read that the unemployment rate is at a 17 or 18-year low right now. Usually when the unemployment rate goes down, FAFSA filing goes down. As opportunities in the workplace improve, more people go to work, and oftentimes fewer people go to school. We have not seen that this year. We've bucked that historical trend, and we are seeing FAFSA filing among high school seniors continue to go up. That's really, really good news for all of us. We also weren't sure, based on income, how FAFSA filing would change when we gave students and parents 3 more months. I know there's a lot of numbers on this chart, and I'm not sure that you can read them all, but I can tell you that it was very, very similar. We were especially concerned about the low-income filers. We were concerned that they would understand and know that the FAFSA started on October 1st, and they did. And you can see that the filing across income categories is very, very similar from year to year, and even though the FAFSA started on October 1st, that it was very, very consistent. So we were really, really pleased to see that. We were pleased to see that we're still doing a really good job of reaching those lower income filers. This is another trend that we're happy to see continue. So we felt that by moving the calendar back to October 1st, that we would be reaching students and their parents before they'd chosen a school. And what we saw is that many, many more filers put 5 or more schools, listed 5 or more schools on the FAFSA than they had in the past. And you'll see among the freshmen, 47% of freshman filers listed 5 or more schools on the FAFSA. We feel that's very good. We think you feel that too. We want students comparison shopping. We want students finding the best fit for them, because when they find the best fit, they go to your schools and they stay and they complete and they get a good job and they pay off their loans. So this is all really, really good news. So thank you to all of you for that. Finally, we weren't sure how IRS DRT use was going to look this October because the IRS DOT changed, and the tax data is now hidden. Students and parents can't see the tax data. We were a little worried that IRS DOT use would go down. It did not go down. It was very similar to what it was last year. So we are still seeing IRS DOT use at a very, very high rate. So we're very, very pleased to see that too, and we expect that to continue. And now I'll hand it back to Misty.
Thank you, Ed. All right, you heard Dr. Johnson talk this morning about the mobile app. You will all have an opportunity to see it in more detail at session 33, which we're offering 3 times this week, and then also in the Resource Center, which as soon as this session is done, you'll be able to head down to the Resource Center, and we have a whole area set up there, so you will be able to actually touch and feel it and play with it on your own. So that is really exciting. We're very excited that we're going to be able to get your feedback, and we're very excited to hear what you think about that. You also heard Dr. Johnson talk about the app not being the only way for people to complete the FAFSA. The website is something that we do expect some users will continue to rely on, and it was in need of a refresh. Not only that, it was not designed for use with mobile devices, and because we have a lot more people that are using mobile devices, we decided that it was time to make the FAFSA responsive to the type of device that people are using when they're completing it. So this was something that we had hoped to implement on October 1st, but because of, as I said before, the complexity of the changes related to the IRS data retrieval tool, it was something that we had to postpone, but we are expecting to implement this in the spring of 2018. We're doing this in a phased approach, so it's not going to be the entire website all at once. Phase 1, we focused on the application itself. Starts with the home page, so there's a new look and feel to the home page, and then the entire process from logging in all the way through to the confirmation page. Phase 3 will be focusing on corrections, and phase 2 is all the other stuff. So we're actually back in DC now working on phase 2, and we're making some good progress with that. But I'm going to talk about phase 1 just a little bit and show you some screenshots. Please keep in mind that we are still in development. We haven't completed testing yet. There will likely be some changes to what you see here, but this will give you a pretty good idea of how things are expected to look. So this is, you can see it's a different color scheme. The current FAFSA is very green. The new FAFSA, very blue. So this is an idea of what the home page is expected to look like. It does scroll. There is more information down below, but this is really where we want people to be. We want them, when they come to the FAFSA site, to go in and either complete the FAFSA or do whatever activities they might need to do, viewing their SAR, making corrections, whatever the case might be. This is the new login page. As we were making these changes, we took a look at problem areas within the application process. We do get a lot of feedback from various sources. We hear from our call center about the types of calls that we receive from parents and students. We hear things through our social media channels. You know, we hear things from you. We hear things from all kinds of sources. And we do know that we have a lot of different scenarios that exist when it comes to filling out the FAFSA. We have students and parents that work on it together. We have students that fill out the whole thing, including the parent section, and the parent does nothing more than sign. We have parents that fill out the entire thing, including the student sections, and the student does nothing more than sign. And as much as possible, we wanted to be able to address all of those different ways of filling out the FAFSA. So our new login page, you can see there are still 2 options for logging in. There's logging in with the FSA ID, which should only be done by the student. So you can see that instead of saying log in with FSA ID or log in some other way, we say, I am the student. And if that option is selected, the FSA ID is the only way to log in. This is beneficial to the student because if they log in successfully at the beginning with their FSA ID, then using the IRS data retrieval tool and then signing later on is not going to be a problem. Now, on the other hand, if somebody other than the student is going to be starting the application, whether it's a parent, a preparer, or if it is somebody from one of the freely associated states where they don't have the Social Security number, and we create that pseudo SSN for them, then they would choose the option on the right, which says, I am a parent preparer or student from a freely associated state. And if they choose that option, then what they'll be presented with is the fields that collect the student's social security number, name, and date of birth. And then that is how the application is started. Assuming that there is no application on file already, this is the next page that displays. This is our Get Started page. This was another challenging page because for most of the year, we have 2 cycles available. And depending on the type of school that a student is going to, we can't make an assumption that they're there to fill out the most recent FAFSA. There is quite a lengthy period of time where they're just as likely to be filling out the prior year's FAFSA. So we tried to give both cycles, equal weight. They're side by side instead of on top of each other. We made sure that both buttons basically looked the same. We didn't, try to imply that one of them was a more desired action. So this is what the Get Started page will look like. And then the next few screens are just to give you a sense of, what some of the different pages are going to look like, and there are a few instances where you can see what it is expected to look like on a mobile device. So you can see we have across the top, we still have the steps, but whereas the current application, it's not quite as noticeable when you're proceeding from step to step. You'll see as we go across the top that as you are in a step, you have the little pen, and as you complete a step, the color changes and you get a check mark. So we're trying to be a little more obvious about the progress that the applicant is making. This first screen is the social security number, name, date of birth. This would be pre-filled whether the login occurred with the FSA ID or with the personally identifiable information. And that's the same as currently. This is an example of how we're trying to make some changes to where we provide our messaging. Currently, any messaging that we displays at the top. And sometimes it's hard for people to understand how the message at the top relates to the different questions that are on the page. So this is an example of where we're tying the specific messaging to the questions themselves. So in this case, we're grouping together the questions related to selective service registration and providing some context above them so people understand why we're asking. This gives you an idea of the college search feature. People will still have the 2 different options for providing the list of colleges on their FAFSA. In some cases, the student knows what the school code is, and in that case, they can just indicate that they know that, then provide that. And if they don't know, then they say they don't know the code, and then they would do their search based on the state, city, school name. And here's another screen from the college search. So once the search has retrieved some results, here's the list of the schools that met the criteria. The student would just select the schools that they want to add to the FAFSA and then click Next. And then here's where they provide the housing plans. So the college search is one of the more complex functions within the FAFSA. It's a very difficult thing to simplify because we're pulling data from a particular source. There's certain information that has to be provided. But we took a look at how we could make the actual experience of getting the schools added to the FAFSA a little bit better. This is what we believe is quite an improvement over the way things are currently done. And here's an example too. You can see at the top where we've got the check mark for that first step because that's been completed now that we're in the second step. So you can see that's the indication that progress is being made, which is good. All right, here is an example of how we have laid out the questions a little bit differently for the dependency section. The current design of the application, if somebody is considered dependent based on the way they've answered the dependency questions, every time they answer no to one question, then we float in another question. They answer no, we float in another question. Usability tells us that people feel like we're tricking them. They don't like that because they feel like it's just never going to end. And so we did quite a bit of research. We did quite a bit of research to figure out what would be a better approach. And interestingly enough, what we found is that if we display all of the questions for them, but do it differently, they feel like they're getting fewer questions. What we decided to do is take a checkbox approach. This example is the homeless questions, but we do the same thing on the previous page where we have all the dependency questions minus homeless and minus the first 5, where we lay out all of the different questions and then we give a none of the above option. So you're technically being presented with all the questions, but you're not having to answer each question, because if none of them are true, then you're only providing the one answer of none of the above. And usability tells us that people really, really like this, this solution. All right, here you can see the page that I actually showed you the student version earlier in the presentation. This is where we provide the option to use the IRS data retrieval tool. And here is at the very end when we're collecting signatures. This is another area that is especially challenging for people, particularly dependent students, because we're collecting 2 different signatures. The current method of collecting signatures is a very long scrollable page. We collect the signature for one person at the top and another person at the bottom. You know, if 2 different people are going in at different times, rather than sitting side by side, which is not that easy to do, it can get very confusing. So we took a very different approach here. You can see we're separately tracking the student signature status and the parent signature status. Excuse me. And we're trying to be very clear about who we're collecting the signature for and whether we've already collected it or if it's still needed. And if we've already collected it, how was that signature applied? Was it an electronic signature? Or did they indicate that they wanted to provide the signature in a different way? Excuse me. So a few different examples here. You can see in the prior one, we didn't have both signatures, and in this instance, we've collected the signature for both the student and the parent. And you can see that progress bar at the top, which is giving an indication that they've pretty much completed the FAFSA at this point. And here's where we indicate the complete signature status and offer the option to submit the FAFSA. All right, so unfortunately, that is something that we don't have the ability to demonstrate here at the conference. As I said, we're still working on it, but we will be providing information on IFAP in advance of implementing these changes. Hopefully, we will be able to provide you with some screenshots similar to the FAFSA on the web preview presentation that we provide to you at the beginning of the year, as well as an electronic announcement to give you a summary of the changes that are the bigger changes and what you need to be aware of. In some cases, it might be as simple as, you know, making a change to a button label or something like that. And if you have resources at your institution that you provide, you may need to make some changes in order to sync up with what we've done on the website. All right, one other change that we're going to be implementing in the spring is related to the process around verifying the citizenship status for those people who indicate on the FAFSA that they are an eligible non-citizen. So people will continue to report that status and provide their ARN. We will continue to match with DHS. The vast majority of those people come back with an indication that everything is A-OK. But in some cases, the DHS match comes back indicating that, you know, it was not a good match. And in that case, there is an additional step that schools have to follow, or a few additional steps that schools have to follow in order to determine whether the student is going to be eligible to receive Title IV aid. Some of you have been lucky enough that you've never had to deal with this. Some of you may have seen one or two, and some of you may be from schools where you get, you know, quite a large population. Those of you are those are the ones that I'm expecting to be especially excited about this change, because we're moving away from a paper process. So instead of filling out the dreaded G845 form via paper, sending it in the mail, waiting 10 to 20 business days for a response, instead it's going to be moved to an online process, so there'll be less data entry. You'll receive the responses a lot faster, typically within 3 to 5 business days. A student only needs to be verified by one school, so if the student has listed multiple colleges on the FAFSA, because this is an online process, other schools will be able to see if one school has already completed the process and gotten the necessary verification. We will be providing more detailed information about that change in an electronic announcement, and we expect that to happen in the spring. There will be instructions for logging into the new system. It's called the DHS Save system. We'll also be updating the FSA handbook, and there will be some additional changes to some of the user guides that we post impacts to things like, I believe, some SAR comment impacts and things like that. We plan to disseminate the user IDs that are required to use this system around March of 2018, and then DHS is going to start rejecting the paper form G845 beginning in May, because we expect to have this new system fully implemented and everybody signed up and ready to go prior to that. I'm going to end with a reminder of the various publications that we make available to all of you to give you the information you need so you're prepared for changes that we'll be making for 2019-20, which I will not be telling you about because I learned my lesson last year. Felt like I was ahead of things and able to give you some really great inside info, but then life got in the way and things changed, and so I'm a little fearful about telling you stuff that might happen a year from now. So. Mum's the word. But here's the list of documents that you should be looking out for. You'll start seeing the first ones probably around June of 2018. We post the bulk of them in around the August, September timeframe, and then we have a few that come out after we've actually implemented the 1920 cycle. And then, of course, the dates that are most important to all of us. The FAFSA on the Web demonstration site becomes available, as I said, the Sunday before October 1st. So this year, that'll be September 23rd of 2018. Express for Windows is released on September 24th. And then the FAFSA itself, including the IRS data retrieval tool, FA access to CPS Online for those of you who use that, all of that will occur on October 1st. And then we start distributing SARs and ICERs on October 2nd. As always, please contact us should you have any questions or if you have any suggestions for enhancements, things that we can do to make the system better. We always love to hear from you. And I'm going to end with that and say that we thank you so much for coming and for staying, and hope that you enjoy the rest of the conference. Thank you very much.
Thank you.